The grand marble staircase gleamed under the chandelier's glow, its crystals catching the morning sun like thousands of tiny diamonds. Somewhere in the vast mansion, a vacuum hummed faintly, soft and timid, just like the girl pushing it. Her name was Emily Hart, 24 years old, small-framed and quieter than a falling feather. She had been working at the Dalton estate for only 3 months, but in a house like this, where silence was currency and perfection an expectation, she already felt invisible. She never complained. She just moved from room to room, polishing silver and dusting frames that held the world's richest smiles. Every step she took echoed softly through the endless marble halls of Alexander Dalton, the billionaire CEO who built half the city's skyline. But she had never met him. Not properly, anyway. She had seen him, tall, sharp, featured, his jaw carved like it was made for magazine covers. But from afar, to her, he was less of a person and more of a rumor. The staff whispered stories of his brilliance, his coldness, his billion-dollar temper. Yet beneath the tailored suits and the empire he ruled, there was something that haunted Alexander Dalton. Something no one dared talk about. Emily had no idea that soon she would be the one to uncover it. That morning, as she entered his private wing, her heart pounded a little faster. Only senior staff were allowed here. But Mrs. Lewis, the head housekeeper, had handed her the silver tray with a nod. "Mr. Dalton requested breakfast in bed today," she said. "He's in one of his moods. Be quiet. Be invisible." That was something Emily was good at. Balancing the tray, she pushed open the large oak door. The room smelled faintly of cedar and ocean breeze, expensive, masculine, and strangely lonely. Curtains half drawn let in streaks of light that danced across the bed where Alexander Dalton lay, eyes closed, one arm resting over the pillow, chest rising and falling slowly. He looked peaceful, almost human. Emily hesitated. Should she wake him? No, she'd been told never to disturb him unnecessarily. Quietly, she placed the tray on the bedside table. A plate of avocado toast, coffee in fine china, and a folded napkin embroidered with his initials. She adjusted the tray perfectly parallel to the table's edge, just as Mrs. Lewis had taught her. Then, as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small photo frame face down on the nightstand. Her fingers twitched. She shouldn't look, but curiosity, that gentle human flaw, got the better of her. She lifted the frame. It was a picture of a woman, beautiful, smiling, with hair the same shade of sunlight. Her arm was wrapped around a little boy, maybe 8 years old. The boy's eyes, bright, alive, mirrored Alexander's perfectly. A pang of sadness flickered in Emily's chest. A wife, a son. But the photo looked old, too old. Dust on the edges, a faint crack through the glass. She set it back carefully, guilt washing over her. Then she froze. Behind her, the sound of shifting sheets. A sigh, a faint movement, her eyes widened. Mr. Dalton was stirring. Emily stepped back, heart thudding wildly. She turned to leave, but then stopped. Something about the way he moved didn't feel right. His eyes remained closed. His breathing changed, but only slightly. It almost looked deliberate. Was he pretending to sleep? She frowned, confused. Why would a billionaire pretend to sleep while his maid served him breakfast? Her hands trembled as she reached for the tray, about to retreat quietly. But then she noticed something else. His hand, resting on the edge of the blanket, was trembling slightly, and there next to it was a small glass of spilled water. His fingers brushed against the wet sheet. Without thinking, Emily stepped closer. She grabbed a towel from the table, leaned in, and carefully dabbed the water near his hand so it wouldn't soak through. Her movements were slow, gentle, as if afraid even air might wake him. Her breath caught when her sleeve brushed his arm. His skin was warm, his pulse steady. For a moment, she could almost feel the human heartbeat behind the billionaire myth. She didn't know that he was watching, eyes barely open, lashes hiding his gaze. Alexander Dalton had been awake the whole time. It had started as a test. For weeks, he'd heard whispers from his staff about the new maid. The shy one, the one who doesn't talk. Some said she was kind. Others said she was slow. He didn't trust either. He had learned long ago that kindness was a mask people wore when they wanted something. So he decided to test her. He'd pretend to sleep, and see what she'd do when she thought no one was watching. What he didn't expect was tenderness. He felt her presence before she even moved. The faint shuffle of her feet, the nervous rhythm of her breathing. Then, the towel warm against his skin. She wasn't wiping just the sheet. She was careful to dry the back of his hand, her touch hesitant, respectful, almost motherly. Alexander's chest tightened. No one had touched him with that kind of care in years. Not since. He shut down the thought before it finished. He couldn't show emotion. Not here. Not now. But when she adjusted his blanket so he wouldn't get cold from the damp spot, and gently placed his photo frame upright again, he felt something stir inside him that he couldn't name. Emily finished cleaning, unaware that he had seen everything. She paused for a moment, looking down at him. He seemed lonely. Her lips parted, a whisper slipping out before she could stop it. "I hope you're okay, sir." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because, for the first time, she realized that even billionaires could look breakable. Then she quietly walked out of the room, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender soap and sincerity. Alexander waited until the door clicked shut. Only then did he open his eyes fully. The tray sat untouched. The napkin folded. The towel slightly damp on the table. He looked at his hand, still warm from her touch, and for a long time he couldn't move. Something about that girl, something about her silence, it unsettled him. And for the first time in years he didn't feel in control. He reached for the photo frame and turned it upright again. The faces stared back, his late wife Clara and their son Ethan. Gun in a car accident 5 years ago. He swallowed hard, his chest ached. That same hollow ache that came every morning, reminding him that all his billions couldn't buy back what he'd lost. But today something was different. Someone had cared enough to notice. He exhaled slowly, eyes misting. Emily Hart, he whispered, testing the name on his tongue. It sounded soft, real human, and somewhere deep in the corners of that cold golden mansion a door inside his heart began to crack open. The next morning, the rain fell over the Dalton estate like silk threads sliding down glass. The mansion was quieter than usual. Even the staff spoke in whispers, as though the gray clouds above had dampened their spirits. But Alexander Dalton's mind wasn't quiet at all. He sat in his home office, a space lined with books, half-opened files and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked over his empire. The world outside moved with precision: cars, markets, meetings. Inside, however, his thoughts replayed the same image. The shy maid's careful hands drying the water by his bedside, her whisper of concern, her soft, "I hope you're okay, sir." He had been surrounded by power his entire life. Investors admired him, competitors feared him, and employees obeyed him. But no one had cared for him, not since Clara and Ethan. That girl's single act of unnoticed kindness had left a mark that refused to fade, and Alexander Dalton didn't like being affected. He picked up his phone. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, his tone calm but commanding. "Send the new maid Emily Hart to clean my office today." There was a pause on the line, long enough for his decision to sound unusual. Then came the housekeeper's polite reply, "Yes, sir, I'll send her up immediately." Emily's heart raced as she climbed the grand staircase. She rarely entered the upper floor, the CEO's personal space, except for his bedroom the day before. And now, being called to clean his office, that was unheard of. She knocked softly. "Sir, come in." His voice, deep and composed, sent a tremor through her. She pushed the door open, clutching her cleaning cloth and duster like shields. Alexander didn't look up right away. He sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing papers with the kind of focus that could slice through steel. His suit was dark charcoal, his tie perfectly knotted, his posture flawless. Everything about him screamed control, but when he finally raised his eyes she froze. Those eyes were sharper than she remembered, steel gray, observant yet not unkind. "You're Emily," he said simply. She nodded quickly. "Why, yes sir, Mrs. Lewis tells me you're reliable." I try to be, sir." "Good," he said, leaning back slightly. "Then I want you to handle this office personally from now on, no one else." Emily blinked, stunned. "Me, sir? Alone?" "Yes," he said. "You seem to notice things others miss." The words confused her. Was that a compliment? Or a test? "I trust you can keep things in order," he added. "I'll do my best, sir." He watched her begin her work, slow, careful, the kind of diligence that came from fear of making a mistake. But there was grace in it too. She didn't rush, she didn't sigh. She treated every surface like it mattered, as if respect itself could shine through her cloth. As she dusted the bookshelves, her eyes lingered on the framed photos. Magazine covers, architectural designs, news features titled "Dalton Industries Rebuilding the Future." And then, a small wooden model caught her attention. A tiny replica of a house, built with delicate craftsmanship. She smiled faintly. "Did you build this, sir?" Alexander's brows lifted. He wasn't used to being spoken to so casually by staff, but her voice carried no boldness, just quiet curiosity. "Yes," he said after a moment. "It was a project I made with my son." Her hand stilled. "Oh, it's beautiful." He nodded once, eyes drifting to the model. "He used to say he'd build me a real one someday." The air shifted, gentle, fragile. Emily sensed it immediately and lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "It's fine." His tone softened unexpectedly. "You can keep cleaning." She did, carefully, quietly. But something in her chest ached for the man behind that hard exterior, the one who still kept his son's toy house like a treasure. That afternoon, after she finished, Emily gathered her supplies and turned to leave. "Emily." Alexander's voice stopped her. She turned quickly. "Yes, sir." He hesitated, surprising even himself with the question forming in his throat. "Do you like working here?" Her eyes widened. No one had ever asked her that. It's a good job, sir," she said softly. "I'm grateful." "That's not what I asked," he replied gently. She bit her lip, glancing at the spotless window. "It can be lonely sometimes," she admitted. "But I'm used to that." "Lonely?" His gaze lingered. "You live alone?" "Yes, sir. My parents passed away a few years ago. I'm just trying to make ends meet." Something tightened in his chest. For a moment he saw not just a maid, but a person fighting quietly to survive in a world that rarely noticed quiet people. He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Emily. You can go now." She smiled faintly. A small, polite smile, and left. But that night, as the rain continued to fall, Alexander found himself replaying her words. It can be lonely sometimes. He understood that loneliness better than anyone. The next day, a quiet pattern began to form. Emily would come into his office each morning, cleaning silently while Alexander pretended to work. But secretly he was observing her careful gestures, the way she hummed softly under her breath when she thought no one could hear, the way she always straightened the same photo frame of his family, as if paying silent respect. He noticed the little things, how she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear, how she paused to look out the window at the rain, how she always left the room spotless but never took credit. She never lingered. Never asked for favors. She simply did her job and cared. And one afternoon he decided to test that again. He called Mrs. Lewis to his study. "I want to see how Miss Hart handles stress," he said. Mrs. Lewis frowned. "She's a good girl, sir. But she's sensitive." "Then let's find out how strong sensitive people really are." He wasn't being cruel. At least not intentionally. But Alexander Dalton had lived by one rule his whole life: trust only after testing. So he arranged for a setup. A vase, one of his most expensive, worth nearly $30,000, was placed near the edge of his desk. He waited until Emily entered to clean. When it happened, it wasn't her fault. As she dusted the lower shelf, her elbow brushed the desk ever so slightly, and the crystal vase tipped. Her gasp filled the silence, followed by the sharp shatter of glass on marble. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Emily froze, staring at the shards scattered across the floor. Panic surged in her chest. "Oh no, oh no, no." She dropped to her knees, trembling as she tried to pick up the pieces. Alexander rose from his chair, his expression unreadable. "Do you know what that was worth?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident, I swear." He said nothing. Just watched. Her fingers shook as she gathered the shards, cutting her thumb on a jagged edge. A drop of blood fell onto the marble. She gasped softly, clutching her hand. But kept cleaning. He stepped forward. "Stop. I'll replace it somehow," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'll work extra hours. Anything." He said again, lower this time. She froze, tears trembling on her lashes. Then, to her shock, his hand reached out. He took the shard from her bleeding fingers gently and set it aside. "Don't." His tone softened. "You'll hurt yourself." "But the vase can be replaced," he said quietly. "You can't." Her eyes lifted to his, and for the first time she saw something in them she hadn't expected. Compassion. Regret. Humanity. He fetched a tissue from his desk, wrapping it around her thumb with careful precision. His touch was steady, gentle, like he was afraid she might break. "I'm sorry," he murmured, surprising even himself. "I shouldn't have startled you." Was she blinked, confused? You're not angry." "Not at you," he said softly. "Not anymore." When she left his office that day, she was still shaken. Not from fear, but from the bewildering warmth of his kindness. And Alexander Dalton sat at his desk long after she was gone, staring at the broken shards on the floor. It had been a test. But in the end, he was the one who'd been tested. Because when he saw her bleed and still apologize, when he saw her care more about his property than her own pain, something inside him broke a little more. For the first time in years, he wondered if all the walls he'd built had only trapped him inside his own loneliness. And the shy maid he'd tried to test. She was slowly teaching him what it meant to be human again. The mansion had its moods. Like a living thing, some days it glowed with golden light and laughter echoing faintly from the kitchens. Other days, it felt like a cold cathedral, vast, beautiful and painfully empty. This week it was the latter. The rain hadn't stopped in days, the city skyline disappeared behind a wall of gray, and the Dalton estate felt cut off from the world. Quiet halls, drawn curtains, and the faint ticking of clocks marking time that refused to move forward. Emily noticed the stillness right away when she came in for her morning cleaning shift. The guards at the gate looked tense. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Lewis, seemed unusually worried. When Emily passed her in the corridor, the older woman stopped her. "Emily, have you seen Mr. Dalton today?" "No, Mom," Emily said softly. "He usually calls for me around 10. Mrs. Lewis frowned. "He hasn't called anyone, not even his secretary. I knocked on his study earlier." No answer. Concern crept into Emily's chest. "Maybe he went out. In this weather." Mrs. Lewis shook her head. "No, he never leaves without notice." There was a pause. Then, seeing Emily's hesitant expression, Mrs. Lewis sighed. "Go on," she said gently. "You seem to have a calm effect on him. Check on him, dear, but quietly." Emily nodded and made her way up the grand staircase, the soft patter of rain following her through the windows. The door to Alexander Dalton's study was half closed. She knocked softly. "Sir," no answer. She tried again. "Mr. Dalton?" "It's Emily." Still silence. Her heart thudded uneasily as she pushed the door open. The air inside was heavy. The faint smell of stale coffee, cold air from the open balcony door, papers scattered across the desk, and then she saw him. Alexander Dalton sat slumped in his chair, his suit jacket loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, something she had never seen before. His eyes were half open, unfocused, skin pale and damp with sweat. "Sir," she gasped, rushing forward. "Mr. Dalton. Are you all right? He stirred weakly, blinking as though seeing her through fog. Emily, sir, you're burning up. She touched his forehead. It was scorching hot. He tried to wave her off, his pride fighting to stay upright. I'm fine. Just a fever. I'll be all right. But his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Emily didn't hesitate. You need to rest. Please, let me help you. Before he could protest, she slid her arm gently under his and helped him to his feet. He was heavy, his tall frame swaying against her smaller one, but she held on with quiet strength. Emily, he murmured, his pride collapsing into exhaustion. You shouldn't. Shush, she said softly. Just lean on me, sir. For the first time, Alexander Dalton, the man who commanded hundreds, who built empires, let someone lead him. She guided him to the sofa, fetched a blanket, and hurried to the kitchen for a bowl of cold water and a clean towel. When she returned, he was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. Mr. Dalton, please stay awake, she said gently, setting the bowl down. He didn't reply, his head tilted to one side, lips slightly parted. Emily soaked the towel and began to dab his forehead. Her movements were slow, tender, just as she'd done that morning weeks ago when she thought he was asleep. His hand twitched once, as if remembering. She noticed a framed photo lying on the side table, Clara and Ethan again. She smiled faintly through worry. They must have loved you very much, she whispered. If he heard, he didn't respond. But his jaw relaxed, his breathing evened slightly, as though her voice had chased away a bad dream. Hours passed. The fever wouldn't break. Emily refused to leave his side. She called the in-house doctor, arranged medicine, made sure his room stayed quiet and cool. When Mrs. Lewis came in to relieve her, Emily shook her head. I'll stay, she said simply. Mrs. Lewis gave her a long, thoughtful look, then nodded. You've got a kind heart, child. Be careful with it. Emily smiled faintly. It's just, someone should be here. Through the long hours of night she stayed, changing the towel on his forehead, whispering reassurance, humming softly to herself. At one point, he stirred, half-conscious. Why are you still here? He murmured weakly. Because you need someone to be, she said quietly. He opened his eyes halfway, confusion mixing with vulnerability. People always leave. Then let me be the first who doesn't, she said, her voice barely a whisper. His lips curved, the faintest ghost of a smile, before sleep took him again. When dawn finally came, the fever broke. Emily sat by the window, exhausted, her head resting on her folded arms. The first light touched the mansion's golden walls, washing the night's loneliness away. Alexander stirred. He blinked at the ceiling, confusion flickering in his eyes before the memory returned. The fever, the darkness, and then her voice. He turned his head. Emily was asleep beside the couch, still sitting upright, her head bowed, the damp towel in her lap. For a long moment, her face, calm even in sleep, looked so peaceful. No makeup, no mask, no trace of deceit, just genuine care. He felt something inside him shift. A quiet realization that this girl had done more for him in one night than all his wealth and doctors had in years. When she stirred awake, she gasped softly. Sir, you're up. He smiled faintly. Apparently. How are you feeling? Alive, he said simply. Because of you. She blushed, fumbling with the towel. I just did what anyone would, sir. Not anyone, he corrected gently. Most people wouldn't have stayed. She didn't know what to say. He studied her for a moment longer, then said quietly, Emily, have I ever told you about my son? Her breath caught. Only that you built a house together. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Ethan was 8, smartest boy I ever knew. Brave, he wanted to be an architect like me. One day he told me, Dad, I'm going to build a house big enough for all the lonely people. Emily's eyes softened. He sounds wonderful. He was, Alexander said, his voice trembling slightly. And when I lost him, I stopped building anything at all. She hesitated, then said gently, maybe it's time you started again. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a servant, but a mirror reflecting his own lost humanity back at him. That day marked a shift. Alexander insisted Emily take the morning off, but she refused to leave until he promised to rest. He watched her walk out of the room, her footsteps light but steady, and for the first time he realized how much her presence had filled the emptiness of his mansion. As the door closed behind her, he whispered under his breath, the words too soft for anyone to hear, "Thank you, Emily." That evening, when she returned, she found something waiting for her on the small table near the entrance. A note written in neat, confident handwriting, "For your kindness, not your service. A.D." Beside it lay a small box. Inside was a silver locket. When she opened it, she found a tiny photo, not of him, but of a sunrise over the ocean. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't meant to impress. It was a symbol of gratitude, of new beginnings. And as she closed it gently in her palm, Emily's heart smiled for the first time in a very long while. The storm that had haunted the Dalton estate finally broke. Sunlight poured through the windows for the first time in a week, gilding the marble floors with warmth. The air smelled clean, alive, and new, as though the mansion itself had taken a deep breath after years of silence. And in that quiet rebirth, something had shifted in Alexander Dalton too. For years his life had been a schedule. board meetings, conferences, quarterly reviews. His emotions were filed away as neatly as his business reports. But since that night, since Emily stayed by his side when fever threatened to take him, something inside him refused to return to its cage. He found himself thinking about her when he didn't mean to. The way she smiled timidly when nervous. The way she always tucked her hair behind her ear. The quiet sincerity in her voice when she said, "Maybe it's time you started building again." It was as though her gentleness had reached places in him that grief had sealed shut. That morning, Emily arrived as usual, dressed neatly in her uniform, hair braided, her expression calm, though her heart was nervous. After the fever, she didn't know if things would go back to the way they were. Would he pretend nothing happened? Would he act distant again? When she entered his study, he was already standing by the window, dressed casually in a white shirt and slacks, no tie, no armor of professionalism. It made him look younger, human. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly. He turned and to her surprise, he smiled. A small, real smile. "Good morning, Emily," he said, his tone warm, unfamiliar. "You're early. I wanted to check if you were feeling better." He nodded. "Thanks to you, I am. I owe you more than I can say." Her cheeks colored faintly. "You don't owe me anything, sir. I just stayed when no one else would," he finished softly. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, something unspoken hung in the air, fragile, tender, and dangerous. She looked away first, busying herself with dusting the desk. "Do you need anything this morning, sir?" "Yes," he said after a moment. "Actually, I do." She froze. "I want you to help me build something." "Build something?" she repeated, confused. He smiled faintly, turning to the window again. "I've been designing a new project, a housing initiative for single parents and low-income families. Affordable homes near good schools. I started it years ago, but stopped." "Because of your son?" she asked softly. He nodded, voice quieter now. "He wanted to build homes for the lonely. And I think I'm ready to finish what he started." Emily's heart swelled. "That's wonderful. Sir, I want you to help me choose the name," he said suddenly. "Mick," she almost laughed from surprise. "I'm just a maid." "You're not just anything, Emily," he said, his tone firm yet kind. "You have a heart that sees what others miss. That's rarer than any degree." She blinked, unsure how to respond. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help," he said simply. Her lips curved in a shy smile. "Then I'll help." The days turned into weeks, and the mansion felt different. Where silence once reigned, quiet conversation now lived. Alexander would sometimes join the staff for morning coffee, an act that stunned everyone. Emily would bring fresh flowers to his study. Simple wildflowers from the roadside. And he'd let them stay, even when they didn't match the expensive decor. He began asking her opinion on little things. Colors for the model houses, names for the blocks, designs for children's parks. She spoke softly, unsure at first, but he listened, really listened, as if her words had value. And slowly the walls between Billionaire and Maid began to blur. One afternoon, as the late sunlight streamed in golden through the glass, Emily noticed Alexander sitting alone on the terrace, papers scattered beside him. He looked lost in thought. Not the cold, calculated kind she once saw, but something gentler, like he was searching for a piece of himself. She hesitated by the door before stepping out. "Sir." He glanced up. "Hi, Emily, did I interrupt?" "No," he said. "Actually, I could use your opinion again." She smiled faintly. "About the housing project?" "Sort of." He held up a photo, a design sketch. "I've been debating what to call the Central Park." She studied it. A wide open area with trees, benches, and a playground. "It's beautiful," he nodded. "I was thinking maybe call it Ethan's Garden." Her breath caught softly. "Your son?" "Yes, he loved gardens. Said flowers don't care how rich or poor you are. They bloom for everyone." She smiled warmly. "Then it's perfect, sir." He looked at her. Really looked, and something in her expression reminded him of Clara. The same gentle eyes, the same quiet compassion. It wasn't love, not yet. It was healing. A shared humanity that felt like sunlight after years of darkness. "Thank you, Emily," he said softly. "You've given me back more than you know." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I'd forgotten what it felt like to smile." Her heart fluttered. "You smile more than you think, sir." He chuckled. "Only when you're around." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and for a brief moment, neither of them knew what to say. That evening, after she left, Alexander sat in the quiet terrace, the golden sky fading to dusk. He thought of everything she'd brought back into his life, light, warmth, laughter. He reached for his phone, opening a voice note app, something he hadn't done in years. He used to record memories for Ethan, small bedtime stories about dreams and adventures. Now he pressed record. "Ethan," he said softly, voice trembling, "you told me once that love isn't something you look for. It finds you when you start looking for others. I think I finally understand that now." He paused, staring at the horizon. "There's someone here, someone kind. She reminds me of the world you wanted to build. I don't know what it means yet, but I feel alive again. Maybe that's enough for now." He stopped the recording and leaned back, closing his eyes as a soft breeze brushed his face. For the first time in years the air didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. The next morning Emily arrived early again, but something felt off. Mrs. Lewis met her at the entrance looking pale. "Is everything all right?" Emily asked. Lewis hesitated. "There's news. Mr. Dalton's board members want to cancel the housing project. They say it's a bad investment, not profitable enough." Emily's heart sank. "But it's for families who need help. They don't care," the older woman said sadly. "They only see numbers." Emily's hands tightened on her cleaning cloth. For the first time, frustration flickered across her calm face. He worked so hard on this, he believed in it. Mrs. Lewis gave her a look both proud and cautious. "You care about him, don't you?" Emily blinked, startled. I respect him." Mrs. Lewis smiled faintly. "Sometimes respect grows into something deeper. Just be careful with your heart, child. The world he lives in doesn't play fair." Emily nodded, but inside she already knew. Because what she felt wasn't just respect anymore. It was something softer, something that made her heart ache when she saw him in pain. That afternoon Alexander returned from a meeting looking tired, shoulders tense. Emily was in his office tidying up quietly. He stopped by the door. "Emily." Was she turned, reading his face instantly. "The meeting didn't go well, did it?" He shook his head. "They think compassion is a weakness. They've suspended the project." Her heart twisted. "I'm so sorry, sir." He smiled faintly, not his usual controlled smile but one laced with sadness. "Funny, isn't it? I can build skyscrapers but I can't build a single home for people who need it most." She stepped closer before she realized it. "You can still fight for it." He looked up, surprised. "You taught me something," she said softly. "That kindness doesn't need to be profitable to be powerful. You said flowers bloom for everyone, remember? Then let them bloom, sir, even if no one else understands." Alexander stared at her, eyes glistening. For the first time, someone wasn't telling him to let go. Someone was telling him to keep going. And in that moment, the shy maid who once hid behind silence became the voice that reignited a billionaire's purpose. That night, as the city lights shimmered below the estate, Alexander sat at his desk staring at the plans for the project. He smiled faintly, determination replacing doubt. He picked up his pen, wrote one word across the top of the blueprint, and underlined it twice. "Than's promise." Then he whispered into the empty room. For him. And for her. The night had been long, but Alexander Dalton barely noticed. His pen moved steadily across the page, his mind alight with purpose. Ethan's promise. The name glowed on every document like a silent vow. For the first time in years he wasn't building for profit, he was building for meaning. By dawn, his desk was filled with plans, revised budgets, new strategies and personal funding allocations. He was ready to take on his own board if he had to, and deep down he knew he would. At breakfast, the staff moved quietly through the grand dining hall, but Emily wasn't her usual calm self. She kept glancing toward the corridor, waiting. When Alexander finally appeared, he looked different. Not just tired, driven. His jaw was set, his eyes clear. "Good morning, sir," Emily greeted softly. He paused by the doorway, his gaze softening as he saw her. "Good morning, Emily. I'll be heading into the city early today." She nodded but hesitated. "Is it about the project?" He gave a faint, wry smile. "Yes. Today we find out if kindness can still win in a boardroom full of wolves." Her heart twisted. "Be careful, sir." He met her eyes. Steady, warm. "With you cheering for me, I'll be fine." Her cheeks flushed. I wasn't. But he'd already turned, his laughter echoing faintly down the hall. The boardroom at Dalton Industries was glass and steel, cold, sharp, and ruthless. The table gleamed like a mirror, reflecting faces that had long forgotten compassion. "Mr. Dalton," said one of the directors, a man with silver hair and an even colder stare, "this proposal of yours. Ethan's promise. It's financially unsound. There's no measurable ROI. Alexander leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Not every investment pays in dollars, Richard." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter circled the room. Another board member, Ms. Kent, spoke next. "Alex, your personal history is tragic and we understand your emotional connection. But sentiment doesn't keep shareholders happy." He looked at her, then around the room. "Do you know how many unsold luxury apartments we own right now? Over 200. Empty shells that no one needs, while real families sleep in cars. Don't talk to me about what makes shareholders happy. I've made them rich for 20 years. A murmur rose, some glanced away, others stiffened. "I'm not asking for approval," Alexander said quietly. "I'm informing you. I'll fund Ethan's promise with my personal wealth if necessary." "Alex, that's reckless!" Richard snapped. "You could bankrupt yourself. Then I'll go broke doing something that matters." He stood, gathered his files, and turned toward the door. Meeting adjourned. The silence that followed was heavy. Some watched him with shock, others with grudging admiration. But none of them could stop him now. Back at the mansion, Emily was polishing the stair rail when she heard the front doors open. She turned quickly, and her breath caught. He was smiling. Not the polite, corporate smile she had seen before. A real one. "It's approved?" she asked hopefully. He shook his head. "No, They rejected it. Her face fell. But I went ahead anyway, he added, his grin widening. I'm funding it myself. Sir, she whispered, eyes wide. That's everything you have. He shrugged lightly. Money comes and goes. But this will stay. Something inside her broke and bloomed at the same time. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. That's brave, she said finally. That's foolish, he replied softly, but it feels right. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's promise came alive. Construction sites buzzed with workers. Sketches turned into foundations. Photographs of the first finished model homes lined Alexander's study walls. Emily often joined him there in the evenings, bringing him coffee, watching him work with quiet admiration. Sometimes, they talked about small things, weather, books, memories. Other times they just sat in comfortable silence, and little by little, the billionaire and the maid became something more than employer and employee. They became two souls rebuilding the world together. But peace rarely lasts long. One Friday afternoon, a black SUV stopped in front of the Dalton estate. A man in a dark suit stepped out. Alexander's head of security, Daniel Pierce. He was carrying an envelope. Emily was in the hall when Daniel arrived. Mr. Pierce, she asked cautiously. I need to see Mr. Dalton, he said curtly, though his tone was respectful. Alexander appeared moments later, straightening his cuffs. Daniel, what is it? Sir, Daniel said, handing over the envelope. I thought you should see this before the media does. Alexander opened it, and his face hardened. Inside were photos. Photos of him and Emily, laughing together in the garden, walking side by side through the construction site, her hand brushing his arm. And beneath the photos, a headline draft from a gossip site. Billionaire CEO's secret romance with housemaid. Charity project just a cover-up. Emily froze. Her heart stopped. Oh no. They're threatening to publish this by morning. Daniel said grimly. Unless we pay to silence it. Alexander looked at the photos again, anger and disbelief flashing across his face. They twisted everything. Emily's voice trembled. Sir, I swear I never. He cut her off gently, eyes softening. I know you didn't, Emily. But the world won't believe that, she whispered. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. No, they won't. Daniel looked between them. What do you want me to do, sir? Alexander thought for a long moment, then said quietly, nothing, let them print it. Emily gasped. What? But your reputation, your company. Let them print it. He repeated, voice firm. I'm done living afraid of what others think. The truth will outlast the noise. He turned to her, his expression soft but resolute. I won't let them shame you for being kind. The tears welled in her eyes. You don't have to protect me, maybe not, he said, his voice breaking just slightly. But I want to. By morning, the story was everywhere. Social media exploded. News anchors dissected every photo, every gesture. Comment sections filled with judgment, curiosity, sympathy. The world had found its new scandal, the billionaire and his maid. Reporters gathered outside the mansion gates. Drones buzzed overhead. Emily stayed inside, terrified to step out. When Alexander came to see her that afternoon, she was sitting in the kitchen, hands trembling around a cup of untouched tea. I'm so sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. He shook his head. No, it's the price of honesty. She looked up, eyes glistening. They're calling me names. Saying I trapped you, that I'm. Enough, he said firmly, taking her hand, gently but with conviction. You didn't trap me, Emily. You freed me. Her eyes widened. I spent years hiding behind walls of glass and gold, he continued. You reminded me what it means to be human. If the world can't understand that, that's their tragedy, not ours. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with emotion, grief, defiance, tenderness. Then Emily whispered, what happens now? He smiled faintly, eyes soft. Now, we keep building. Let them talk. While they write headlines, we'll build homes. That evening, the sky turned crimson with sunset. Outside the mansion gates, cameras flashed. Inside, quiet music played in the study as Alexander and Emily worked side by side, reviewing new blueprints. Every few minutes he'd glance at her, the girl who'd once been too shy to speak above a whisper. Now, she was fearless, and he realized something startling. He wasn't afraid anymore either. When she caught him staring, she blushed and looked away. What? She asked softly. He smiled. Just thinking how strange it is I spent half my life chasing success, and I only found peace when I stopped running. She smiled back. Maybe peace isn't something you chase, sir. Maybe it's something that finds you, when your heart's finally quiet enough to listen. He exhaled slowly, eyes glistening. Maybe you're right, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Outside, the storm of headlines raged. Inside, the billionaire and his shy maid sat in quiet defiance, heart steady, hope unbroken. And though neither dared say it aloud, they both knew something had changed forever.